Everyone. Welcome to the ACAP spending webinar. I appreciate all the attendance here. Before we kick everything off, I do want to hand it over to Doug Wolfgang for a few words. And go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Eric. Good to see you all. So really, it continue to be in a good place with ACAP. It's so exciting to be here with over 2,000 applications now, I believe, across the state that have been accepted into the program. 1,300 of them, at least, that are funded by signed contracts with producers, with farmers. And we're well on our way to spending the original ARPA allocation of 154 million by that December 2026 deadline. But that deadline is looming, and it's nearly, almost 18 months away, which is going to fly, and we'll be here before we know it. Meanwhile, we have new funding, the 2024 spending threshold that was approved, state funding and personal income tax in the Clean Streams Fund last September, getting ready to approve the 2025 spending threshold here coming up in the commission meeting in 2 weeks. So we have multiple pots of funding. Whatever we can do to just keep our eye on getting those funds spent by the end of 2026, the federal portion, is really crucial for us. But these projects, of course, as you know, are transforming the landscape of Pennsylvania by improving water quality, soil health, and making farms more viable and productive. It's really making a difference with local water quality and ultimately the Chesapeake Bay or Delaware Basin or Ohio Basin. But we just appreciate the partnership, first and foremost with conservation districts. Who are boots on the ground, who are really getting this job done. I know there were several challenges that were identified early on, or risk factors in getting these projects completed, most of all being the availability of technical assistance to our NRCS friends who are on this call. We've really relied heavily on a strong presence of NRCS here in Pennsylvania through the engineering side to get the structural practices completed, and we will continue to rely heavily on a strong presence of NRCS here. But then just also the work that's been done through Jen Fetter and the center, the new center at Penn State. That's made such a unique structure here in Pennsylvania that I think is a model nationally for how we can partner on technical assistance. Continue to be very excited about where that heads in the future. And then, of course, my staff, to Justin, Eric, and team, just really continue to appreciate your part in this and your leadership. And I know that we're in the place we're in now because of the work that you've done and your team. So with that, I just wanted to say I appreciate it. If there's anything we can do, Justin, Eric, myself, to help make your jobs easier and to improve ACAP as we go forward, obviously open door and open ears to any of that. But with that, I'm just going to say thanks again and turn it back over to Eric.
All right, thanks, Doug. And I'll second that thank you to all the districts and our partners out there. It's been a tremendous amount of work being done, and it couldn't have been done without the partnerships that we do have. So we appreciate that. Just to give you an outline of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the fiscal year 25-26 allocations. We're trying to get that done here so we can get those funds rolling out by as early as we can, hopefully July 1st if that budget passes. Spending requirements, keeping up with spending requirements. How do we do that? How do we budget for the funds that we're getting? And we're going to talk about some spending deadlines here at the end of the presentation here today, and we'll go over that spending report that was sent out earlier to you guys. There might be quite a few questions with that, so we're going to touch on that, and you can bring those questions up then. So fiscal year 25-26 state budget, that includes the $50 million of the Clean Streams Fund. As Doug has already noted, that comes from the personal income tax. So we get 71.5% of that for the ACAP program, which entitles us to $35.75 million. An additional $3.146 million was earned from the federal funds. So that interest was on top of that. So the total ACAP funds for fiscal year 25-26 is $38.896 million. Now, the SEC administers that program, so we get 4% for admin and then another 4% for contractual services, which helps us support the center that we have working on this program. So districts received the $35,784,320 of the total 38.896. So that's roughly 92% of the funds goes to the districts and goes to projects going onto the ground. So what's the criteria that we look at? This is always a good question that we have raised to us. So that criteria that we look at is ag and parish stream miles, number of cropland acres, number of farms, and number of livestock and poultry. Those are the four categories we have. We weigh all those at 25%. So we come up with the allocations that way. If there's anything else that we thought that we want to put into the criteria, we can do that. We haven't done that at this point. Maybe that happens later on down the road, but right now we're just doing the top four there. So we did put a minimum allocation set at $300,000. It's been set from the beginning of the program. We haven't changed it. So the minimum amount that some county would get would be $300,000 in any fiscal year. Now, if you feel that you don't need that whole $300,000 and you don't think your county can use that, let us know. We can put that money back into the formula again and rerun those calculations. But we feel that the $300,000 mark is a good mark for us. That allows you to potentially hire somebody with your technical assistance and admin money with that $300,000. So with that formula, here's the breakdown of the allocations for your county. If you can't see this, please let us know. We can send this out to you. This is what we'll be taking to the May board meeting for the Conservation Commission to approve. This has already been sent to our work group, so the work group has seen it. They are fine with it. That work group consists of, I think, 8 different counties and some partnering agencies. So this has already been vetted. This is what we are sending to the board for approval. That approval will be contingent on the passing of the budget. So in most years, it passes pretty much right away, but we have been in some years where it doesn't get passed till September or October, but we want to get those approved contingent upon the budget being passed. So as soon as that budget is passed, we can send that out. And in best case scenario, the budget will pass. We'd be able to send these allocations out in July, and they usually take about 4 weeks to get to the districts. So you're probably looking at about August is when you see the best case scenarios, when you see the advancements coming to you. So again, if you have any questions about the allocations, the allocation method, you want to see the allocation for your county, reach out to us. We'll make that available to you guys, and we'll go from there. So is there any questions about what we passed on the allocations as of right now? I don't see anything in the chat. If there's no questions, I'll hand it over to Patrick.
All righty. So we're going to talk here briefly about some spending requirements. So as I'm sure everybody's familiar, districts are receiving an annual allocation based on the fiscal year. As Eric said, that's going to be early July, depending on, of course, the passage of the budget. And districts have 2 years to spend those funds once they are received. Jenny, it's not letting me advance here.
If you go down to the bottom corner, left corner, you should be able to click next.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so what is a spending requirement? Let's define terms here. Essentially, simply put, it's the amount of money that needs to be spent by a particular date, and that dollar value. So why do spending requirements matter? Um, Ultimately, the biggest reason that these spending requirements are so important is that in order to continue to get money going into the future, we need to be showing that money is being spent in a timely and appropriate manner so we can continue to receive those funds. Um, and as mentioned previously, the SEC and ACAP law is what sets those spending requirements. So that 2-year time frame is set out directly in the ACAP law that we're working under. All right. So a little calculation here on what is our spending requirement and how do we figure out that spending requirement. Essentially, it is the total value of the allocations that are under a deadline at a particular point minus the amount that's spent. Um, and within our GIS system, you'll be able to see it if that amount is popping up in red at the bottom. That means that you still have money that needs to be spent. Anything in green would be in excess. So here's an example for us here. So Justin is feeling very generous and he decides that he needs to take us all out for ice cream one particular day. So he has $50 that needs to be spent by the end of the day. He's going to spend 30 of that on taking us all out for ice cream. So what does that mean? It means at the end of that, he still has a spending requirement of $20. So the annual summary report within the GIS is going to be your best resource that we have currently to figure out your spending requirements. So that's definitely something that you should be referencing. And if you're unsure exactly how to navigate that portion of the GIS, definitely speak with your regional coordinator and we can walk you through that and help you get that sorted out. Also, what is the final date for each of the pots of money, each of the allocations that you've received? As mentioned, each of these has a 2-year spending status for the state money, and the federal money needs to be spent out by the end of 2026. So that final deadline date is also going to play a factor in your spending requirement. Okay. And so a big part of this is going to be that budgeting and looking at the projects you have in the works right now and trying to see at what point in time money will be spent out for each of those projects that you're currently working on and matching that up with those deadlines. So if you know that by the end of 2026 you have X dollars that need to be spent, you can look and see what projects do I have in the works now. Are they at the construction phase where they're going to be spent out very quickly? Are they at the application phase where we're hopeful that money will be allocated to those projects, but none has been so far? And so again, that plays a large role in figuring out that spending status and ensuring that you're hitting all those deadlines. So again, as I mentioned, looking at that committed remaining and that annual summary within the GIS is going to be your best place for this. I know some districts have their own spending formulas and their own Excel sheets primarily that they're looking at this, but just know that you can also do that same work and get that information out of the GIS. Big thing to note about the GIS though, is that it's always going to lag a little bit behind reality, and it only knows what the district tells it. So it only can interpret and show spending based on the information that you've put in. So if you have signed contracts that have yet to be put into the system, or you have anticipated bills or bills that have already been filled out and sent in, and they haven't been documented within the GIS, we're not able on our side to see that spending as being out the door. So really critical to make sure that those GIS reports and those quarterlies are kept up to date. So at what point do funds count as being spent? Simply put, it's when an expense is when program funds leave your program account. So you've completed an invoice to an engineer, that money has been paid out, that is spent funding. A check has been written to a grant recipient, whether it's a working advance out to that farmer or to that contractor. At any point, once that money leaves the district and it goes to a vendor or it goes to a farmer or contractor, at that point, that money is considered as spent. So here's just a screenshot from that annual summary report within the GIS. This is looking at the whole state here. And as I mentioned before, if you're unsure of how to navigate this, certainly sit down with your regional rep and we can make sure you're interpreting this properly so you can use this resource. So some ways that money gets spent here. Biggest one is going to be contracted projects. And again, really critical that those contracts are being put into the GIS in a timely manner so that everybody can see in as real time as possible current spending status for each county. Additionally, once those contracts are signed, a great way to get money moving and get it out of the district and into the farmer or contractor's hands is doing those advances for a project. That really helps keep things moving along and is of great benefit with these spending deadlines coming up here. Get new contracts, those advance funds, partial payments, making sure that once the project is completed, the appropriate people are getting out to the farm in a timely manner to certify that project. Therefore, the district is able to make those final payments in a timely fashion. And again, important to note, admin and TA, education, all of those expenses count towards your spending requirements. So definitely be taking a look at your spending status, not only for projects, but also your anticipated and completed admin and TA. Maybe that's a great opportunity then if you have additional technical assistance and maybe not another project to move that money to, you look at hosting some sort of promotional or educational event for farmers to attend and learn more about the program. Limiting the number of return project payments as well is a big help. It can certainly be hard depending on your cost estimates going into a project and bids once that project is begun. But as much as is possible, minimizing the amount of project returns after completion is a big help. Any money that is left over within a contract, that money is then tied up until that project's completed, and it can't be moved to another project. So that would be another hindrance to getting those funds spent out the door. So that's something else to really spend some time on, making sure those you have good cost estimates going into a project and then good strong bids once that project begins. So these are some of the questions that myself and the other regional staff will be asking. We've sat down with just about everybody at this point, and really gone through your spending status and your current contracts. So these are some of the questions we like to look at and things we like to discuss with you. So looking at your contracts, what stages are your projects currently in? How quickly do you think particular projects will be completed? And therefore, when can those final payments and final certifications be made? So again, things to consider here, things to look at as you're looking at your projects with these deadlines in mind. So this form here on the right, this comes from the Dirt and Gravel Roads program, but we're working on an ACAP version of this. Should be out relatively soon for you as well to reference. I'm sure many of you have similar spreadsheets that you're using in-house already. but just a simple way to budget and look at your expected expenses. So you're able to put in what are the anticipated admin and staff costs you're going to have. What do you anticipate as far as technical assistance? And then from that, you can determine how much money you have remaining to spend. So if you don't have a spreadsheet like this and you are interested in having one, again, reach out to your regional staff and we can help you either use an existing one or get you set up with one. Big thing here, if you are concerned about your spending status and you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at your timeframes, and you're concerned about meeting those deadlines, the earlier you can reach out to the regional staff or Eric, the better. And we can help you work through those things, come up with some strategies to maybe speed things along, looking at different projects, ways to allocate money to portions of projects to increase the timeframes. So again, the more communication, the better for everybody involved, so we can hit all these deadlines that we have. So here's a graphic of the funds that we have available currently and those deadlines, just the visualization for you. Again, showing that federal funding being needing to be spent by the end of 2026, and then 2-year timeframes from allocation for those clean streams funds coming from the state. The Dirt and Gravel Roads program has done a lot of work on these spending requirements in the past. They've put together some resources and presentations for you that are available. So just a good resource here if you're looking for a little more information on spending requirements and strategies. Definitely consult these. I know you'll all be getting this webinar, but also your regional staff can certainly send these out to you as well if you're interested.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Samantha Zahner. I should have control of the screen now. Let me double check that before I get started. Okay, so I'm going to give some tips, some information on how to keep up with the spending requirements for the ACAP program. So here are a few contributing factors as to why a district might not be able to meet the spending requirements, the spending deadlines of the program. I know a lot of districts suffer from staff turnover, and it is hard to keep experienced staff, or you have a lot of programs that each staff person is covering, and they're not able to dedicate much time to the ACAP program itself. So it's really important to have a couple people that are able to work on the program, that are familiar with the program, just in case people do move on to other jobs, you are not left without a ACAP coordinator at your district. Project returns, return project payments are also another factor that districts are experiencing, and that can lead to having a lot of excess funds available that need to get reallocated within a quick time period. So that's something to keep in mind as well. To go along with that, if you only rely on advance payments for projects, that could lead to potential returns as well. If a project happens to fall through and that money needs to come back to the district. Also, giving advance payments to ACAP recipients could possibly make them tax liable for that money as well, if they don't have invoices coming in directly after to pay off those funds. Engineering or delays in designs, changes in designs also contribute to lots of delays. I know a lot of districts are having issues obtaining engineers and are running into hearing that those engineers have a backlog and it may take 6 months to a year to receive those completed designs. And then unfortunately, a lot of the times, the ACAP recipient themselves will want to make changes after the fact, which will lead to the engineer having to kind of go back to the drawing board and make some changes, which could delay the start of the project itself. And the timing of running the program is also important when the district decides to accept applications, rank applications, award funding, advertise for bids, that kind of thing. It's important to make sure you know when you need to spend your money by and anticipate getting certain things done ahead of the intended construction season. So in order to run an effective grant program, it's important to remember that projects need to be completed to ensure that the money is spent and out of the district account. An example we have here is showing a district relying on advance payments, and the project is possibly not getting completed by the end of the spending period. And then this slide, it's just showing that because of the uncommitted balance, which is populated in the GIS site, that is showing that you have not met your spending requirement for that 2-year time frame. So that's a good area in the spending status section of your GIS. That is a good thing to keep an eye on, as it will tell you where you are at with your funds. And then here's just a kind of visual representation of how the funds are distributed, and showing that there is only one continuous construction season with each set of funding, but also that there is overlap. So it is important to kind of keep things moving, as ideally you will be getting money in each year. And then this graph is just highlighting that it is difficult to prepare for a project in the wintertime, and difficult to try and quickly wrap things up at the end of a spending period. So like I mentioned before, it is important to run this as an annual grant program instead of attempting to take the full 2 years to spend each allocation. So it is important to work proactively and not reactively in order to get these funds continually out the door and keep projects moving. And here are just a few things you can do in the previous year, in this year in 2025, to be able to construct projects in the 2026 season. I'm not going to read all this off to you, but these are just some good things to keep in mind with the timing of things. And all these first bullet points highlighted, those are things you can do before you actually receive the next annual allocation. That way, as soon as you receive the money yourselves at the district, you can sign contracts and get the money rolling, either out to the farmers in advance or pay engineers for designs and get things moving with the projects. And again, here's just kind of a sample timeline, like what was highlighted in the visual a couple slides before. And this is a slide just kind of highlighting an example timeline of how a district would have contracted their 2024 allocation, if they had pre-application meetings and project rankings last winter and spring through the summer, to be able to spend money on designs, permitting, and bidding for contracts, and immediately contract that money as soon as they received it after the budget passed, and then to be able to start construction in the spring and then close out projects in the fall into the winter. And then here is just highlighting the incoming 2025 money, how it would be beneficial to have the 2024 money kind of wrapped up out the door ahead of getting the 2025 money into the district. And like we mentioned before, running an annual grant program is important. It's also very important to be upfront with your ACAP applicants and the grant recipients to make sure that they are aware of these timelines. That it is very important to keep things moving as quickly as possible and that there are deadlines for the district that they need to keep. It's also important to fund projects that can be completed within the required time frame. I know a lot of districts are getting applications for very large projects that may span 2 construction seasons, or if the designs aren't already in hand, it could take 6 months to a year to get the design start to finish, and then to bid out the project and have it actually completed, it could be another year until that happens. So it's important to keep the whole project timeline in mind with the spending requirements. It's also important to fund a variety of projects to help keep the money rolling. I think we'll touch on it later that there are projects that are able to be completed a lot quicker than others. And then here's just a few things that may lead to a project taking longer to complete than normal. Like I mentioned before, engineering has been a really large sticking point for a lot of districts. Permitting, obtaining permits can be a lengthy process in some areas. And then the bidding process as well can lead to some delays. And these are just some things to keep in mind, both with engineers and permit reviewers when obtaining designs and permits for these projects to get started. We also run the risk, unfortunately, of not having any bids or quotes coming in or bids coming in way higher than expected that could lead to projects not being able to get contracted when they were expected to. So here's a little bit of a discussion if anyone would like to throw comments in the chat about what types of ACAP projects you all are seeing that can be completed quickly and what types often have extra steps that take longer to complete. And I'll give you guys maybe a minute to throw some info in the chat if you'd like. Otherwise, I'll provide some examples that I myself have. Don't think I can see the chat on my screen. So if Jenny or Eric, if you happen to see anything pop up and could let me know, that would be helpful.
Nothing so far, Sam.
Okay, so I'll give you guys a couple examples that I have off the top of my head. Oh, okay, the chat just popped up for me. Heavy use area, yes, roofed heavy use areas, manure storages, like round tanks, roofed manure stacking areas. Those are projects that have a lot of steps and are taking longer to engineer and longer to actually construct themselves. Grazing and fencing, yes, that is, from what I've seen, a lot of districts have been able to get rotational grazing, fencing projects on the ground very quickly, just because there's not a lot of, I guess, too much of a technical engineering per se aspect to those practices. And they're obviously not as pricey, and it seems like there are more contractors able to install those projects themselves. Coordinating equip for already engineered projects. Yes, that is something that could play a big factor in the timing of things as well. So does this mean districts should never fund certain types of projects? No, we would like to see a variety of projects. If you guys have questions about how to get certain projects on the ground in a timely manner, please reach out to us. We're always up for discussing different projects and how to brainstorm ways in which to get these things moving along quicker. And here are just some tips for if you're only receiving high dollar projects. Go back a slide. Sorry, I didn't realize that would click through quite so quickly. Again, if you guys are, I know the minimum allocation for the annual funding, I believe, is $300,000. And I know some districts are getting projects that are requests for projects that are $500,000 or more. And that would be difficult to fund because that is less than your annual allocation. So if that's the case, please reach out to us and we can brainstorm how to potentially fund those projects. Tips to speed up projects, making sure you have clear communication with both the ACAP recipient themselves as well as engineers or contractors involved in the project. And it's important to make sure you're having multiple forms of communication. A phone call or in person followed up by something in writing is normally the best way to make sure everyone's on the same page about things. Pre-application meetings are very important, as well as pre-design meetings, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, to make sure the engineer and the ACAP recipient are both aware of any limitations with the site or the project, and that the ACAP applicant is receiving a product that works best for them and their operation. And pre-bid sites showings, pre-construction meetings are very important for any of the contractors to be aware of certain rules that they need to abide by and any timeframes that they need to make sure they are operating within. Frequent construction inspections are also very important to make sure that things are staying on track and being completed as they need to for program requirements. And like I mentioned before, providing information in writing as well as over the phone or in person is very important. And then these are some points for with the engineer designer. Specifically, a lot of engineers have a kind of step-by-step process that they follow. So this is good to keep in mind what their timeline looks like, as well as keeping in mind what your requirements and timelines are as well. And then here are just some points on the GIS and budgeting to make sure that you are keeping your GIS up to date so that it is accurately reflecting how you are spending your money, what money you have left to spend, and make sure that you budget accurately so that you don't have excess money left over at the very end of the time frame that you would need to quickly allocate, reallocate, or roll into new projects. And as always, if anything comes in under budget, or if you get project returns and you need to reallocate that money quickly, please reach out to us and we will do our best to help brainstorm ways in which to get that money reallocated. And with that, I think I am passing the torch over to Becca.
Okay. There. I'm going to get to talk about how to budget. So how to budget your ACAP funds coming up. And it's best to run an annual program because you will receive new funds every year to continue keeping ready for additional allocations. And it helps you stay on track. You've probably seen this circle several times, but it tells you your minimums/maximums that you can spend, your 6% in admin, 14 in TA, and 80% in projects. This is your total given with your absolute maximums, or this is pointing out the minimum. And then the next slide will point out the maximums, and you need to be able to estimate how much admin and tech funds you think you're actually going to use to know how much you need to allocate to projects. You can find this information in the GIS. This shows you a little snip of where to find it. It shows you how much funds are left in Harrisburg that you have to request back. When the next fund should also show up there on the bottom when the 2025 is approved. And this is the summary report where you can get additional information. And when you go to the all contracts tabs, you can also download all the contracts to be able to use that information in your own tracking sheet as well. Allocations are available in different places, the GIS, or in information mailed out by SEC. The spending requirement is down here. That is how much you need to get out of the bank account by that 2-year mark. And this just shows you where the state funds are as well. You can find these in meeting materials and email. If you reach out to your regional, they can also send you the information as well if you are having difficulty finding it. So this is, again, just going over that you need to find out what out of your total allocation, how much of your admin and how much of your technical you are going to spend. There's a couple different ways to estimate that. And if you want any help or want a recommendation on using a spreadsheet, also please reach out to the regional rep. If you are expecting to use less than the maximum, that is also additional project funds you need to account for in your spending budget. So how much do you tend to use? If you may be able to estimate using past quarters for how much you've spent and kind of use the previous years to estimate the following years. Or if you know how much, if you have a couple big projects coming up where you know you're going to spend a lot of time out in the field, to adjust by using a safety factor to last year's expenses. And you can get all this information in that annual summary report within the GIS. So this is where you need to take into account what's going on with your projects. You need to, if you're going to expect any amendments for existing contracts, if projects are coming in under budget, if any contracts have been canceled, that affects with any additional funds you have for new projects, and if you've had any unexpected engineering or permit costs. And then any interest you are accruing that has to be spent on projects as well. Best way is to have your projects ready. You know what you want to fund before the next allocation comes and be able to pick those projects regularly. If you are accepting applications at a specific time period or setting your deadline so you know how many projects you have, coordinating with the allocation to be received. If you need any help or figuring out what allocation is coming, please reach out to SCC or the regionals for additional information.
Yeah, this is Doug. Real quick, interrupting here. There was a question in the chat related to the interest and whether there's a deadline associated with the interest that's earned on the ACAP funds. Justin, Eric, any thoughts to that question?
Yeah, I got thoughts. I don't know if I have an answer. Not at the moment, Lisa. That's something we should talk about. I'd have to dive into the federal rules and see if it counts towards the spending deadlines for the federal money. As far as state money, I don't think we count that against your spending deadlines in dirt and gravel road program, but that's a Sherry question. So good question. Give me some time. I'll dive into it.
Hey, Justin, this is Sherry. I'm on. For
Oh,
for dirt and gravel roads, we do not include interest in the 2-year spending. We do include interest in the 5-year spending associated with the end of the 5-year agreement.
There
Thanks,
you go.
Sherry. Yeah, that's relatable. Appreciate that, Sherry. And thanks, Justin. Good question.
Moving on, since this discussion is based on spending deadlines, let's start the section by referencing the delegation agreement. So according to the delegation agreement, all funds awarded annually must be spent within 24 months from the date that the district receives the funding approved for that fiscal year, but no later than December 31st, 2026, unless extended by the commission, or the funds will revert back to the control of the commission. Feel like we don't have control. So let me request control again. So we know a lot of funding has been distributed to you at different times of the year and from multiple sources, and it can often be confusing. So this chart just helps break it down a little bit so you can more easily see what funding you received and when it needs to be spent. So for fiscal year 22 to 23, just a note that that was when the ACAP program launched. So your district may have received that allocation in a different month than what is listed here, depending on when your agreement was signed. But regardless, for each of these fiscal year allocations, you have 2 years to spend the funds from the time they were deposited into your district's bank account. So all federal funds must be spent and out of the Conservation District's bank account by December 31st of 2026. Any unspent funds will be returned to the federal government. Since these are federal funds, the commission does not have the authority to extend this deadline. So that's why it's imperative that all funds are spent on time, and doing so reinforces the importance and demand for the ACAP program. So basically our goal is to avoid returning any unspent funds. So we want to make sure we're all working together to ensure timely use of these funds. So in an effort to ensure all funds are used by the spending deadline, the commission is setting a deadline for conservation districts to encumber all federal funds by July 1st, 2025. What does encumbered mean? It means that the funds must be legally obligated or committed through the execution of a signed agreement. It's important to understand that encumbered is not quite the same as just allocated. This doesn't just mean that applications were received or approved by your board of directors. It means there's a signed agreement between the districts and the grantee. This agreement then provides proof that the project's moving forward, and like you've already been doing, you'll want to add the agreement and project into GIS, confirm the funds are officially encumbered. We recognize that the July 1st deadline is quickly approaching, but there also needs to be sufficient time to reallocate any unused funds to other counties that can use them before the December 31st deadline. We don't want any districts to lose funding unnecessarily, so if you feel you may not meet that deadline, please contact your regional coordinator as soon as possible. Patrick, Sam, Becca, and I are always available, and we can sit down and take a look at where you're at and see if we can come up with a plan to get you to where you need to be. You all should have received a similar pie chart for your county's federal spending status. So just to note that this is your federal funds, this does not include your state funds. So as you can see in this example, County A has all of their federal funds encumbered, so they are in good shape. County B still has a little over almost 600,000 left to encumber, so they'll need to make sure they are communicating with their regional coordinator to relay what their plan is to get the money spent. And then these are the contact information for the regional coordinators in case you need them. And I'll turn it back over to Eric.
All right, thanks a lot, everyone. See if I can get back. So everyone should have received this sometime last week. This will give you a good outline of these spending reports. And just because we have them committed, I do want to point out, even though we got contracts committed and stuff like that, we still have to spend the money. So if you look at this example, County A, they got 68% of their allocations spent. County B is at 25%. So there's still a lot of spending. And you guys got to realize, and I'm sure you do already, we basically only have about a year and a half of construction available to get these projects done. So allocating and committing these funds is only part of the pie here. We got to get this money spent, and you guys know as well as I do that you're working as hard as you can and stuff like that. Things come up, but if you guys are worried about spending those dollars, please let us know, so we can try to figure out if we need to move the money around, where and how we can do that. So if there's any questions, like Katie said, reach out to your regionals, reach out to me. Let's sit down and discuss our possibilities of how we can move forward with getting these dollars spent. So other than that, I think I'll open up the chat. If you want to unmute, you want to type some questions into the chat. I'm sure everybody has questions, or a few of you have questions. So please feel free to raise any questions that you have right now.
Hey, Eric, this is Doug. Just a quick question. So obviously projects can bundle multi-years worth of funding and funding sources. It could be made up of federal ARPA funds and state funds by multiple years, right? And then so if there are deadlines associated with those funds, that would need to be adhered to based on whatever is the first deadline to occur.
Yep. Yeah, we don't want to be in these projects and we can't spend the funds if we're not meeting the deadlines of the most constrained program. So yeah,
Right.
we need to make sure we hit those marks.
Great.
I don't see any questions coming up in the chat right now. I'll give you another couple minutes here, see if anything pops up.
Eric, Molly typed in a question.
Okay.
It's, if all of our money is allocated, are we in the clear? It's just waiting on NRCS review and site bidding.
I mean, if all your money is allocated, yes. We're looking at this allocated as do we need to move the money? If you have it allocated, you're good, but we still need to spend that money. That the spending deadline is going to be critical too. We just need to keep that in mind. So yes, you're good if you got it all allocated. But remember, is it allocated or do you have contracts signed for that, Molly? If you want to unmute and you can elaborate a little bit. Okay, contracts are signed and allocated. Yeah, yep. So I do know there's a lot of districts out there that have applications and they got approval from the districts, but you're just waiting on other things like that. If that's the case, reach out to us, say, hey, give us the status of where you're at. We got a copy of each individual conservation district's spending report. So if you don't reach out to us, we're probably going to be reaching out to you guys.
Eric, there's a question in the chat. It says, is there anything counties can do to be ready to accept money from other counties that won't spend down their whole allocation?
So the best thing that you can do is get a list of the applications and projects that you have lined up. Maybe the status of those, are they shovel ready, or do they need designs or anything like that? Anything that you can show us that you have a need for that spending for those extra funds would be very helpful. We're in the middle of talks right now of how to set up criteria for the unspent funds so we can spend those monies quickly. So anything you can do to show that you have a need for those funds would help us out tremendously.
Next question, what completion dates should we be putting in contracts for state 2024 funding allocation?
As soon as possible. I would, to be honest with you, it's the way things go. You received your last allocation, your last advancement in probably August of 2024. So I would put it August 2026, knowing that everything has to be wrapped up and everything out the door at the district by 12/2026.
Is that the same for state funding versus federal funding, Eric?
So the state funding has a deadline of probably November. I think that's when most of the districts got their state fund was in November. So it'd be November 2026.
Eric, let me clear some things up here. So, federal versus state, like we don't tie funding to projects. Okay, so you've got federal money, you've got state money. When you put in a replenishment request, we pay it out of the federal money first until that money is gone. right? So when you sign a contract, you may not know when you sign it if it's federal or state at that moment, right? So when you say like you could have a contract you sign now that doesn't get done till 2027, 2028, but you need to know you're spending other money to keep up with your deadlines, right? Because we're always paying out of current year or whatever's oldest. We pay out of oldest money available in Harrisburg first when you submit replenishment requests. Does that make sense? Everybody get that? You don't want to rely on projects that take 4 years constantly, right? That's not going to get you to your spending deadline. But every year you get a new allocation. So you're still, right? Every year you're getting another chunk, 300,000, 300,000, whatever it is, right? So you can stretch projects out, but you need to be doing a bunch of other projects in between there to keep up with that deadline if you have ones that take longer. Sherry, you're an expert here. Am I explaining that right?
Hey, Justin, yeah, it makes sense to me.
All right, is there any more questions?
I don't see any more questions, Eric.
Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating. Thank you for making this program as successful as it has been. Appreciate all the hard work at the conservation district level. I've been there. I've been in your shoes, so I can feel the pressures. But we just got to make sure we get this funding out the door, and because we don't want to send anything back to the federal government, so we want to put that money in our own counties and leave it there. So again, thank you. If you have any questions, reach out to our regional coordinators, reach out to me, and we'll try to help you out with anything that arises for you. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody.